This year, China became the European Union's biggest trading partner for the first time. For more insight on the relations, let's bring in Remi Piet. He's senior partner at Embellie Advisory, as well as a research associate at the University of Miami. Remi, thanks so much for being with us. The ties between the two are deepening, according to the numbers. Europe now gets 22% of its imports from China, according to Eurostat. What's the EU bringing in, and how has COVID-19 affected that?
Well, there's been, structurally a strong compatibility between the capital-intensive economy of the European Union and the labor-intensive economy of China. So obviously, those structural elements are still there, and that explains, the fact that the trade and investment are still, strong. But obviously, during COVID, we've seen a series of different changes, and maybe I would list them at three levels. The first one is the fact that everything will be negotiated at the European Union level, and there's been an ongoing series of talks between China and Brussels with the different heads of states of the European Union. But that has shown that there was a clear path from the European Union and China to try to work together more on issues of reciprocity of trades, reciprocity of investments, and certainly giving more, let's say, trust and confidence for investors to reinvest in Europe if you're Chinese, or in China if you're European. The second one is obviously on the series of different sectors, such as the raw materials sector, the health sector. There's going to be an element of nationalism on those different sectors. We've seen some decision from the European Union to tax aluminium from China. We've seen some decision of potentially relocation of different companies in the health sector in Europe. But apart from this, there's really a push for more, let's say, integration of economies, as long as the rules of the games are clear. There's an interest from China to gain more, alliance with the European Union at a time where the US has been fairly antagonistic towards China. And even if, Joe Biden were to win the next elections, the position of the US is going to be much more mercantilist towards China than it has been in the past. And also in the terms of the European Union, there's an understanding that China could be harnessed and joined together in an effort towards more multilateralism and more, let's say, joint policies on international trade in front of potentially more protectionism from the United States. So on those three levels, there's real capacity for intensification of trade and investment between both China and the European Union. And we will be waiting for the result of the US election to see if that's actually a globalization and renewed globalization, or more an interest of two powers to work together to try to set the agenda.
There were suggestions by some that Beijing was perhaps trying to divide Europe with its 16 plus 1, now 17 plus 1 group of Central and Eastern European countries plus China, that's the plus 1. Do these numbers show otherwise?
Well, when you actually see the large initiative of investment in the Belt and Road Initiative from China, we've seen a series of countries sign up to it. Italy, especially, is a very important country in terms of the European Union, is founding member of the European Union. But when you look at actual projects, there's been only limited projects that saw, a real development in Europe, even by this approach of working maybe on a more bilateral perspective from China with individual countries as part of the Belt and Road Initiative. There's actually, however, a real reinforcement of the structural adjustment policies of the European Union that can actually be seen as more interesting for Eastern European countries in terms of the financing deals of such projects. And as a result, what we're seeing is that China has been much more understanding in terms of working together with, let's say, Angela Merkel, President Macron, and Brussels, more as representative of the entire union than just trying to work with one country at a time, because this has not yielded results. However, there's really a roadmap for more collaboration, as I was saying, between the European Union and China, especially on issues of climate change, on issues of sustainability of supplies, and that goes from raw material to also a series of manufacturing of new technologies, the car industry and others. But this has to be well negotiated between both powers, and that's kind of this understanding that we have right now between Xi Jinping and the representative of the European Union, that there has to be a framework agreement of more, let's say, clearer rules overall, so that China is not seen anymore as a systemic adversary on the international scene, as it was labeled 18 months ago, but much more showing the way with the European Union towards a better multilateralism, including climate change, green investments, for example, but also getting the capacity of working as international blocks towards a renewing of the global economy on maybe a certain elements of reforms, as I said, in public health, in raw material, but also trying to harness the capacity of working together on the global stage.
Remi, I have to ask you very briefly about Huawei. Sweden just became the latest European country to ban the Chinese telecom giant from its 5G network. How much of a setback is that for Sino-European relations?
Well, one way is obviously an issue it has to be looked from the perspective of protection of individual data. That's the perception from the European Union. It is a setback, obviously, from a perspective of Chinese investment, but we should not just focus on one large tree to cover the entire forest. There's actually a series of lower level agreements with Chinese companies and European companies in terms of joint investment in a series of sectors such as water treatment, energy, environmental sciences, for example. In the case of Huawei, it is a very specific issue linked much more to defense and protection of individual data. But again, I was saying it's an issue which is linked to diplomacy. It's linked to understand of individual countries taking decision of also trying to be very honest to give the opportunities for European players such as Nokia, such as Ericsson, such as Alcatel, and some elements to develop their own networks for 5G. But at the same time, those are fundamental because it looks at internet of telecommunication technology, but it's not the entire level of the economy, and there's a lot of potential for investors to look at win-win partnership between the European Union and China on a series of sectors.
Remi Piet joining us from Miami. Thank you for your insight.
My pleasure.